My name is Peter Gossels, and I will be serving as host and moderator of our annual program as I have for the past 23 years. I'm pleased to report that 2 candidates for a seat on the Board of Selectmen and 2 candidates who wish to serve as Associate Planning Board members will join us tonight to respond to your questions in advance of Wayland's town election, which will be held on Tuesday, that's next Tuesday, April 23rd. And you, the viewers of Wayland, will get to ask the questions. But please remember 4 things. First, we do not screen your calls. Our producer answers each call, and he'll ask you to hold on until I can take the call in the studio on this little telephone device. Second, we have only 1 call in line, so please bear with us if you get a busy signal. The line will clear once we've taken a question on the air. After taking your question, please hang up and take your answer on the air so we can free up the line more quickly. Third, this year we will ask each caller to give us his or her name and address before we take his or her question on the air. I will try to maintain a civil discourse as always. And fourth, please turn the volume on your TV down when you call in so you won't be confused by the echo effect. So let's get started. Joining me in Wakeham studio tonight are the 2 candidates who are running for a seat on the Board of Selectmen for a 3-year term. They are, in alphabetical order, Tom J. Fay and Stephen M. Glovsky. Our call-in number is 508-358-3472. We'll put that number on your TV screen when it's time to call. This year we're doing something new. We will have a lightning round when I will ask the candidates 7 questions, and they will answer yes or no only. Before we start taking your call, each candidate will make an opening statement of 2 minutes or less. The order has been determined by prior agreement. What have you agreed to?
We forgot.
Well, time to...
We'll let Steve go first.
Okay.
So who's going first?
I'm going first.
Steve, all right, you're on.
I'm Steve Glowski. I'm running for selectman. Please let it be my turn. I've been around handing out flyers, and if you got one, you can look at that to see my background and my feelings on most issues. It's also on Wayland E-News, and in last week's issue of the Town Crier, they had my candidate statement. What I did not speak about in the flyer, and I want to address tonight, because I got a question actually just on my way here, was my opinion on what should be done with the Loker Fields and the high school project. And I thought I'd just refer to that email that I got earlier in my response, because hopefully I did a good job in responding to the person. She said, "We received your flyer and are inclined to vote for you, but would like to know where you stand on the Loker Field project before we decide." My response was, "I will be discussing it live on Wakeham at 7 tonight. This is an issue that I have been considering myself and was not ready to discuss in my flyer. Vote no at the ballot on both debt exclusion questions. Use of debt exclusion for small projects is not a good practice and is being used here to subvert Prop 2.5 by allowing sustained taxation above 2.5% without voter approval. Vote no on the Loker Field at town meeting. It must be voted down at town meeting regardless of the ballot. Whether we need a recreational turf field in Wayland or not, a separate question entirely, this project is far too expensive and packed with substantial environmental concerns beyond even the turf itself. I will be voting no at town meeting. As to the high school project, this is more difficult, a vote at town meeting for me. As a community, we should provide for high school athletics, both for fitness in school and life spirit. Given Wayland's free spending history and current taxation, I question the cost and despise the additional tax burden. But these are a matter of broader concern, and I will probably vote yes on the high school improvements at town meeting. I hope this answers your question and would much appreciate your vote. I'd be happy to respond to anyone else's questions on this or any other issue. You can reach me at glovsky@aol.com or on my cell phone, 978-808-5042. I'm Steve Glowski. I'm running for selectman, and I'd appreciate your vote. Thank you. Let it be my turn.
Tom, you're next.
Thank you, and congratulations, Peter, on so many years of service with the candidates tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Tom Fay. With your support, I hope to return to a board I thoroughly enjoyed serving on from 2009 to 2012. I hope to contribute my 13 years of town service to continue the steady leadership we enjoy on the board today. As the former Board of Selectmen Chair and member, Chair of Wayland's Library Planning Committee, former Chair of the Wayland to Waveland Hurricane Relief Steering Committee, an attorney, and a 26-year Wayland resident, I have the experience, judgment, knowledge, and commitment to be an effective voice for Wayland's residents. During the past several years, it has been truly enjoyable working with so many elected and appointed town leaders who serve on various boards and committees, working with dedicated town staff, and the many committed town employees that make Wayland special. With your support, I look forward to continuing to work to solve problems and create solutions to the town's challenges. Wayland school system is one of the town's most valuable assets. 26 years ago, my wife Juliet and I, like so many families, moved here for the schools. Our 4 children thrived in Wayland's elementary, middle, and high school programs. Our youngest is a junior here at the high school. I recognize how important quality education is for the community, and I'm committed to support that tradition as we have for decades. Wayland's always committed itself to the growth of young people in the classroom, on the stage, and on the field. I support all 3. I love Wayland. It would be an honor to serve on the Board of Selectmen again. Thank you.
Now it's time for your questions. I invite you to call 508-358-3472. That number should appear on your TV screen, and it does. I happen to be able to see it. Each of the candidates will have 1 minute to answer your questions so that we can field as many questions as possible. I'll reserve the right to ask for rebuttal or follow-up by the candidates. I will try to enforce that 1 minute limit fairly in order to allow each candidate an opportunity to respond to each question and to allow as many voters as possible to call. If there's a lull between your calls, I've prepared some questions of my own. We'll try to keep things moving along in order to get as many of your questions in as possible. So now is the time for you to call in. All right, I will ask the first question. What do you think are the key issues in this race, Tom?
I think first it's the proposals for new fields. And I say that because I'm just noticing a great deal of discussion on both the warrant article for the high school field and the Loker field. I think that's what I sense.
Steve?
Well, I think the key issue really is providing a voice on the Board of Selectmen that is in disharmony with the other voices. Tom has said in his literature that he believes everything is fine in Wayland. He wants to get on the Board of Selectmen in order to continue the stability that our present leadership provides. I have concerns about that conclusion and believe a voice perhaps of opposition, or at least of a different view, is an important factor in any government in order to be sure that issues are properly discussed and not just rubber stamped.
Good evening. You're on Ask the Candidates Live. What is your name and address, please?
Oh, hi, this is Molly Upton.
Hi, Molly.
Hi,
Do you have a question?
two questions. One, what do you think the role of the FinCom should be in relation to the selectmen? And
Shall we ask one at a time?
position on the changing to a town manager.
Excuse me. All right. Steve, you go first.
In terms of the FinCom's role, FinCom is appointed by the selectmen, and in that regard, FinCom really should be an advisory panel.
What?
Selectmen ultimately should be responsible for the decisions made regarding our finances in terms of the town government. Frankly, I would like to see somehow some change in our statutes that would allow the selectmen to have a broader view, including some oversight of the school committee. As far as the town manager proposal, this is an interesting question that really reflects the question of whether or not you are confident you can hire an appropriate or sufficient town manager to have more responsibility. In my campaign, I'm suggesting that we need to offset that decision with perhaps a representative town meeting, which would allow a more concentrated focus of our government in a town, a board of town citizens, to offset the more concentrated authority in the town manager.
Tom?
Thank you. The Finance Committee, I agree, should be advisory. Over the past few years, the Finance Committee, I think, has taken on more responsibility than it really needs to, with the bylaws suggest relative to warrant articles. They do advise the town. I think it's important to appoint members of the Finance Committee that are well-schooled in finance, that have a good sense of what the needs of the town are, but most importantly, what we can afford. So I would agree it should act as primarily advisory. Relative to the town manager proposal, I do support it. It's been an idea that's been advised, that the town has been advised on for many years. It's been encouraged by consultants that have been hired by the town to advise on the structure of town government. One of the reasons for that is, in the consultant's view, and there's two different companies, most recently the Collins Center, the town manager position would streamline decisions, but it wouldn't take away from boards and committees their policy role. Right now we have an excellent town administrator, but by streamlining decisions so that the policies suggested by the boards and the committees can be more efficiently implemented, would save taxpayers money, and it would permit things to get done more quickly. For example, the town meeting has voted over the past few years different expenditures, some larger projects, some smaller projects, but due to the structure of the town, it's difficult to get some of those done.
I'm going to follow up on the issue of the Finance Committee. As you know, in many communities, the Finance Committee is appointed by the moderator. The notion being that the Finance Committee is supposed to be a committee of the body, of the town meeting body, and it's supposed to supervise the work of the selectmen. Here we have the, I think, not unusual, because a lot of other towns also have the selectmen appoint the Finance Committee. But here we have a situation where the selectmen appoint the Finance Committee to oversee themselves. And there seems to be something profoundly wrong about that, in my opinion. It's an opinion I've expressed many times before.
I have heard it before.
So may I have your opinion?
Sure.
Or your response to that, please?
Well, my view, Peter, is that it's a solution that doesn't necessarily equate to a problem. In other words, in my view, I think Wayland has enjoyed a good relationship. Well, let me put it differently. I think the structure that we've had has worked out well for the town. We have a 5-member Board of Selectmen. It's not 3, which I think provides a more broader opinions, if you will, ideally, on the Board of Selectmen. And the accountability ultimately does rest with the Board of Selectmen, as I think it should. I'd be uncomfortable having the accountability of the Finance Committee to be to a town moderator, who is elected in this town, but still it's just one person. And that one person's judgment can be impressive at times, and maybe not. And I'd rather have 5 people choosing the members of the Finance Committee. I think that's more effective.
Before I call on Steve, I just want to mention that I was once in the Finance Committee myself.
Yes, yes.
Many years ago.
Right.
Steve, what's your opinion about the appointment of the Finance Committee?
I think it's an interesting suggestion to have the moderator more involved in town government than just as basically the host of the town meeting. And perhaps a role with the Finance Committee wouldn't be out of place, although whether that role is as a member of the Finance Committee or as the chair, I'm not sure. You know, aside from the number crunching and the details behind the scene, I think the most important thing that I look to the Finance Committee for, and one that I feel has not been fully in place in the last few years, is their voice in the warrant on recommending whether or not to approve or disapprove. It seems that in past years I was able to rely on their opinion, and their opinion seemed to be well stated and clear. Recently, their opinions have tended to be less clear, I guess is the simplest way to put it. And I think we need to have the selectmen emphasize the importance of their financial opinion in the warrant, and to be more precise in their responses.
All right, the next question I have is, how do you propose, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, to improve the way Wayland manages its finances? To improve it, not simply to say, well, what we have here is wonderful. Is there any way that either one of you can divine how our finances can be improved, and so that the tax rate might be reduced in view of the financial difficulties experienced by some of our residents? I'll start with you, Steve.
Thank you. I've been actually thinking about this question a lot recently, and my feeling is that Wayland basically is stuck in the 50s and 60s in terms of their financial oversight. We still believe that individual accountability for basically the workers is not important. I think given computers and the ability to micromanage perhaps with computers individual productivity, we should have all of our employees basically do what lawyers are accustomed to do, and that's keep timesheets. That would allow us to add into a system where we could better use our user fees to properly allocate among our residents the various costs that Wayland incurs, and that, I think, by more properly identifying and detailing our user fees, we would be able to reduce our overall taxes and have people who get the benefit out of certain services more clearly pay for them.
Tom.
Thank you, Peter. One of the challenges Wayland has always had is its low commercial tax base. Right now, the commercial tax base is about 5%, and it's been higher in the past many years ago, and this is still 5% despite $1 million plus coming in from the town center revenue. Eventually River's Edge will be built, and there'll be income coming from that source as well. But the challenges that we have is basically land. A lot of the land in town is open space, so that doesn't contribute to the tax base. We're not in Needham, where we've got offices and commercial space along 128. So that's one of our challenges. And as far as the tax rate is concerned, 10 years ago, I believe, 10 to 15 years ago, our tax rate was top 10 in the state. It isn't anymore. It's about 67th. Our tax rate, I think, is around 1828 per thousand of assessed value. But the tax rate really is less important. What's important to residents is what figure comes in the mail in the spring. And the reason why our commercial tax percentage is only 5% is that Wayland is a hot town. The taxes that we pay is based in part on the valuation of our property. And valuations of Wayland properties have gone up significantly in the past 10 years. And that, if you go to Edgartown right now, the tax rate is about 3%. Why? They don't have many students to educate, and number two, their homes are so valuable. So it's just a numbers game, but I understand fully the angst people receive when they get their tax bill in Wayland.
Did I just make one comment?
You want to make a comment? Go ahead.
I'm on the Board of Assessors right now, and I just wanted to say that basically tax rate, as Tom was suggesting, isn't a relevant figure. It's really the average taxes that we pay per household, and those are in the top 10, not 10%, but top 10 in Massachusetts. We are paying per household an enormous amount of money.
Okay. Now, do you believe and this will require a certain amount of discretion. But do you believe that our new town administrator is doing a good job? And if not, how can she improve her performance? We'll start with Tom.
I do. I've met Louise Miller, although I haven't worked with her closely. I think she's doing an excellent job. As part of my campaign, I reached out to department heads in town, not all of them, just a few of them. But everyone I met with had rave reviews about Ms. Miller. She has excellent communication skills. She's intelligent. She has a particular ability with finance. She's a doer. She sees the big picture. I think we're lucky to have her, and I applaud the Board of Selectmen for choosing her to be our town administrator.
Steve?
As a member of the Board of Assessors, I've had more, I say even still, indirect contact with Louise Miller. Now, we're at the beginning of a 3-year term with her. This is her first time as a town manager, town administrator, and I think that she has room to grow in that role. I think perhaps, and I think my one main criticism is, well, despite what Tom has said, I do not have the impression that she actually asks people what they think. She is inclined to tell people what she wants and expect them to do what she wants without actually even consulting the boards that the people she's supervising work for.
All right. Next question. I would welcome any calls from those of you who are looking in on us. I have questions, but you have better questions, I'm sure. So please consider calling in and getting your answers from the candidates live. That's the whole purpose of the program. All right. What do you think is the best thing the selectmen did this year? We'll start with Steve.
There's going to be a lot of dead air here on that question, frankly, given that the selectmen couldn't even put together a vote on the marijuana issue that didn't wind up having to be redone this fall because somebody neglected to follow the rules on notice. Frankly, Peter put that question to us earlier, and I couldn't come up with anything.
Tom?
Two things come to mind. One, I think hiring Ms. Miller, which I commented on a moment ago. I'm not going to repeat myself. The second thing is, I think taking a closer look at the special act to respond to concerns of members of town committees as well as residents. I think my sense is just recently they've looked at it. They're going to base it more on the current bylaw as opposed to creating a totally new bylaw, which I think is wise. And I think that in the end, residents will be happy with the final product.
Okay. My next question, because you haven't been calling in, what do you think the selectmen can do to encourage affordable housing in Wayland? And we'll address that with Steve.
Well, a few years ago, we had what I consider a successful Habitat for Humanities program where we built some housing on available Wayland land. I think that in order to meet our 40B obligation, which I put as one of the top priorities in Wayland, we need to stop these developments being forced on us. We need to identify other parcels that could be used for that purpose. One of these parcels may be, and the property that we are in negotiation, I believe, with the Army to acquire, to create that as a 40B site. Now, if you add that to the River's Edge project, I've heard a lot of people who are unhappy with River's Edge, but nobody offer an alternative. You combine, one of these projects with River's Edge, I think we can meet our 40B obligation and finally settle it. In the end, I think the legislature went beyond their right, perhaps, in imposing a 10% obligation on a town to have low-income housing. 5% probably would have been more rational, reasonable, but what it is, is.
Well, the 10% was mandated throughout the state.
Exactly. Mandated throughout the state, but overstated.
I just want to make clear, it wasn't just directed at Wayland. Tom?
Sure. River's Edge is a good example of a town taking control over affordable housing issues. It was a project that was initiated by the town, specifically by the Economic Development Committee. Becky Sinisi did a great job in spearheading that effort. A shovel in the ground should occur next year. That is so different than a developer coming into town and dictating what he or she wants to do and proposing projects that really don't fit into a particular neighborhood. It's extremely frustrating for neighbors and frustrating, for the town. Having said that, it's difficult to find parcels that can work for projects. I mean, Peter, you were very much involved in the Nike project, another very successful project, which was initiated by the town with grant monies. And so to answer your question, Peter, if the town can take more control to initiate these projects, I think that would be best for everybody.
Well, what were you mentioned, Steve, the Nike site and the housing there, which apparently I think it's the state, in any event, the state military is going to abandon that project and make it available to, I suppose, a developer, including the town of Wayland, if we were to buy it. What do you know about what's happening there? And what would you propose be done?
Well, we haven't, we've been talking about this, I think, for a couple of years now anyway. And there are really two philosophies in what to do with that property. One, let it go to a developer, allow the developer to build monumental houses there. That would substantially improve our tax base by having large houses which basically won't have a large number of kids in them. So in one sense, that seems to me a very viable option. In the other, as I just previously said, we have a need to meet this 40B 10% requirement that even the River's Edge won't fully accomplish. So this certainly should be a site where we could, as a town, take a certain amount of control and complete our 40B requirement.
Tom?
Sure. So for the residents, Peter, I think you're speaking about the smaller homes next to the Oxbow development that is complete. As I understand it, the federal government does own that site, and I'm concerned that of the town's ability to influence what happens with that site. And I've been thinking about it, and I know the planning board had an article last fall on the topic, but I do think that one of our options is to reach out, although it may have been done already, to elected officials on the federal side to be in our corner, to basically lobby the federal government to permit the town to have greater influence on what happens there. I think that site might be a perfect site for affordable housing. Another option, which I think a lot of people have a problem with, would be just McMansionize it, and I'm not sure that would be fitting or appropriate given the legacy of that space.
Good evening, and welcome to Ask the Candidates Live. What's your name and address, please?
Hi, Henry Simpson at 72 Maiden Lane.
Okay, Henry, what is your question to the candidates?
It seems to me that a fairly easy way over the long term to get more revenue into the town's coffers would be to authorize sales of recreational marijuana. I was wondering what the candidates' positions are on legalized, having a store for recreational marijuana to be on the town ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Recreational marijuana store. We'll start with you, Tom.
Well, to the extent the question may go to Article 22 regarding a marijuana zone, I do support that article. It does permit the town to control where and how medical marijuana is grown, processed, and sold. It minimizes, the proposed warrant article minimizes potential adverse impacts on area properties, residents in the neighborhoods, historic sites, schools, and where minors might congregate. So I do support that, and hopefully it'll pass the town meeting.
Steve?
Well, frankly, last year I was disappointed that we did not pass a zoning bylaw that would have approved recreational marijuana sales in Wayland. I think that the whole issue of abuse of the product is overstated. I think we could have benefited from the tax, benefits of that. They have an area in town that is somewhat remote. It might have, been appropriate to separate it from our town. But the idea that somebody's going to go to Framingham and buy their marijuana and not, have any problems with, the use of it on the way from Framingham to Wayland seems to me to be far-fetched. It's much better to allow somebody to buy it in Wayland and go to their house and use it. I think the likelihood of negative things happening is far less if we were, more local than distant.
Can we cut town employees to reduce the cost of government, Tom?
We sure can. But in this town, there's always been a desire for excellent services. And we could cut employees, but cutting employees means you're going to cut services. And having lived in town for 26 years, that's not a value that residents generally prefer.
Is there any, well, let me just follow up on that. And are there any particular employees, I don't mean by name, but in any department that you think could be reduced?
My experience when I served on the board before was that the town worked hard to evaluate where there might be a need to cut hours and to either through attrition or otherwise cut employees. I was impressed with the process and with technology. I think we've been able to save some money over the years with the amount of staff we have, but that can only go so far because government often is a face-to-face interaction. It's about relationships between employees and residents, and the employees we have in this town are excellent, whether they work in the town building or they work for DPW. We're fortunate to have so many dedicated individuals, many who've been with the town for many years.
Steve?
As a member of the Board of Assessors for the last 2 years, this is one of the primary issues that I've taken up just on our Board of Assessors. Through more efficient use of our staff time, we can actually reduce staff time. And I think we are seeing that in our processing of the Wayland circuit breaker applications. In the past, we've had an employee go through each application in detail and check all the numbers. But this year, one of the processes that I recommended that the board accepted was to have our person who was processing these applications actually keep time as to what's involved and then determine whether or not her efforts were actually saving the town money. I think in the conclusion of that effort this year, we have determined that we don't need to have as much time spent. And we're in the process of considering reducing our staff in order to accommodate that. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, this will be a primary concern for me because no doubt we have staff who are working on functions that if they were more streamlined would not reduce the cost to Wayland or increase the cost to Wayland and may, because we could reduce staff, save us taxes.
Do you, either one of you, foresee any major capital projects in the near future that should be financing? We'll start with, let's see, it's Steve this time.
Maybe my turn. Well, my general feeling is that we have overspent for so many years that we need to take a break. Now, certainly there are capital improvements, whatever, that will have to be addressed. We are not a good town when it comes to maintenance, and unfortunately, if you don't maintain something, you got to replace it. Well, one, I would like to change that philosophy and come up with a more maintenance-oriented town. I think our new DPW facility allows us a lot more opportunity to maintain than we had in the past. I hope that that will be one of the priorities that our town concentrates on going forward. But in terms of additional capital projects, I have stated in my flyer, I believe that we should set a firm capital project limit for a 10-year period and eliminate wish lists. Wish lists are the bane of our town finances, because once somebody says, let's put it on a wish list and maybe we'll consider it down the road, it becomes an expectation. We wind up having to deal with it as a likelihood instead of a possibility.
Tom, capital projects.
And when it comes to capital projects, I have all the faith in the world with town residents. Capital projects, like our operating budget, are voted on by town meeting members in the spring and in the fall when fall town meetings are held. Wants versus needs, that's what people size up. And sure, there have been proposals that have come and lost and some that have passed. But I have no concern about reasoned proposals for capital projects to address a need in town. One of the greatest needs we have is seniors in town. The senior population in Wayland will continue to grow as people continue to grow older. I think right now it's at least 25%, although I may be mistaken, of the town residents. They work out of a small area, the town building, and there have been positive votes at town meeting to build a senior center at the town center. My hope is that soon challenges relative to the property at town center where this has been proposed will be cleared up, and the town senior center, community center can be built to address that need, to put more town in town center, to increase traffic there. I think that is, to answer your question, Peter, is probably one of the leading projects coming up.
Steve, what about the community center? Do you support that?
Thank you for giving me an opportunity to respond on the issue of the community center. In terms of the community center in general, my feeling is that we cannot afford a community center where the proposal is largely that we provide what I view as middle school, after school programs. While the intention of the plan seems to be to have the seniors use the senior center in the mornings, I think the seniors deserve more than just the mornings and non-school vacation weeks for their facility. That and the cost. We have presently a building at Town Center. If you go in at the Town Center development, if you go into it, you can barely see it now. It's the daycare center behind all the trees. I believe that even the community center project has some focus on using that facility, but from my perspective, that facility should be pretty much ready to be used. Now, we should locate our senior center in this community. I think that could be done at a minimal cost. But the other issue involved in town that we faced last year, and that I think we could easily face in this, is additional library space. If we turn this building into an auxiliary library for adult and senior use, and combined it with a senior center, I think we could accomplish the ability to then have the old library be more focused on our youth activities and free up space in the town building. So for what I believe would be $500,000 or less, and I think less, we could change the way Wayland does business, operates and serves its public, and enhance the use of the town center.
Tom, would you like to add something to your earlier?
I don't think the senior center is going to be able to be rehabbed. I don't think the building that Steve speaks about is going to be able to rehab for $500,000 or less. I think the project is more expansive because it needs to be more expansive. I think a community center, senior center is terrific because it's an opportunity for intergenerational interaction. And the more of that we have in town, I think is great for both young people as well as older folks.
If you were elected, I'm addressing this to both of you, but I'll call on Tom first. If you were elected to the Board of Selectmen, what's the first thing that you plan to propose to improve town government?
Earlier, we touched upon the structural management idea of a town manager. And what I would propose, if it hasn't been proposed already, is that the Board of Selectmen commit itself to communicating with town residents through possibly coffees in the neighborhood, certainly public forums at the town building, to educate people on the proposal to change the town bylaws to create a town manager position and explain why it's good for the town.
Steve, what's the first thing that you would propose?
Well, as a member of the Board of Assessors, I have experienced frequent frustration with our town council. And this, unfortunately, has been a situation that has gone on over years, despite the fact that we've recently changed town council. We have spent a fortune, and this has grown over the years that I've been a resident in Wayland since 2000, because I think we have not had adequate representation. So for what went from originally a very small part of our budget is now a major line item. I think as the first thing, coming from a legal background, that I would do, and perhaps the easiest thing would be to suggest a review of town council's success, their activities, their costs, and perhaps consider whether or not we are being cost foolish in spending less per hour and instead of getting a better town council.
Good evening and welcome to Ask the Candidates Live. Here's your chance to put a question to the candidates. What is your name and address, please?
Hi, this is Molly Upton, Bayfield Road again.
Hi, Molly.
Hi. Both gentlemen are attorneys. Could they please comment on whether they would try to get detailed legal cost reports for the town? Right now, there's no detail in the bills that the public sees.
That's pretty clear. We'll try you first, Tom.
Sure. The first challenge with legal bills has to do with what information can be made public. There's an attorney-client privilege, of course, that exists between the town and that lawyer during the course of litigation or the legal issue. Number two, I think if the questioner is asking for more detail than is typically provided between that law firm and any other client, I think that's difficult, and I think it's a challenge. It's a challenge to ask a law firm, though not, it's not totally inappropriate, but I'm trying to think in my mind what the questioner is looking for. I think the question is looking for more maybe a paragraph per each item billed.
Well, I used.
I bill all the time.
Hardly anybody remembers, but I was town council of this,
That's right.
of this town for 11 years. And what I would do is every day when I have a charge against the town of Wayland, I would describe with some particularity what I did that day, and then give the amount of time it took to do it. And ultimately, at the end of each month, I did it on a monthly basis. I would submit it to the town. I don't know what the selectmen did with it. I assume they made it available to some people, but I don't know.
Sure.
I think Steve is the next one to answer the question.
So, I think the really issue is simply a matter of instructing our town council as to what we are going to need in order to be able to document the expenses to the town. So if it's prepared, if you instruct them to prepare their bills, or at least to prepare certain aspects of their bills in a way that could be disclosed without compromising any of the town issues, that really should not be a problem. In fact, I would be surprised if it isn't really possible immediately. Beyond that,
should
though,
it be disclosed? Should these bills be disclosed to the public?
well, certainly there's no reason not to disclose bills that do not compromise the town to the public. In fact, it's impossible for the public to know whether or not we're getting a value from any of our expenses unless we have an opportunity to review the bills themselves.
All right. I'm looking for another question to ask in the absence of a call.
How about the First Parish Church? I'd like to talk about the fence around that. You had that on your list.
All right. Not here. That was in the lightning round.
The lightning round. Well,
All
the
right.
lightning round won't allow us to
No,
go into
it
detail.
won't. We've got 10 minutes, including the lightning round, so I'll let you raise that. Do you want to talk about it?
Well, I'd like to talk about that because that sort of follows the last question and goes with my concern for what we're spending in Wayland. Now, we're being asked to put up 17,000 of our Consumer Preservation Act funds, or whatever.
Community-
CPA
community.
Community. Thank you, Peter. I'm not good with my CPA. Anyway, we're being asked to put up $17,000 for this fund, and it's one of the few things which I thought I might be able to get a hold of what the cost of it is. So I went down to the First Parish Church. So it's a fence that's around center of Wayland, historic. I'm not arguing with the desire to have that well maintained, or even with the desire of Wayland to pay for it. But I went down to this fence. Half of it we replaced a year ago when we redid the intersection, and I went through the 65 railings that need to be replaced and looked at all of the granite supports. And out of all of that, basically I found that there were only 17 railings that needed to be replaced. The rest, with a minor scraping and a little paint, would be fine. The granite supports all look fine. Our DPW, I understand, could easily manufacture any kind of connection that it didn't, and if they didn't want to do it, I could get it at Home Depot. In that way, I went to Home Depot and I looked at the wood that would be used, ground contact, pressure-treated wood, and to replace those 17 pieces that need to be replaced, that would be $18 each, about $350, $50 worth of paint. We could make it a community project and perhaps do it ourselves, or we could have 2 people from the DPW do it. If it were to cost that out, it shouldn't be more than $1,500 worth of manpower, so $2,000 worth of expense should take care of it. Where's the $17,000 going? Beyond that, the idea is to have this $17,000 be paid directly over to the church without having the DPW involved, without getting any bids, without knowing where the money is going, without even knowing what it actually ultimately costs. This whole concept, I think, is poorly framed, and it makes me concerned about all the rest of the costs that we are facing in Wayland.
Okay, Tom?
Sure. So the topic at hand is Article 19 in the town warrant on expenditure of monies to build a fence in front of the First Parish Church in the Wayland Town Center.
Well, there is a fence there now.
To replace it.
It's
It's in bad shape. Right. And so I do support this article, but hesitantly. I'm always hesitant about the town, of course, paying monies to a church institution given church-state limitations. However, this is a fence that's been there a very long time. It predates even the pavement of the roads. It's a unique situation since it really is an integral part of the landscape in the historic district, which I value so much. Most of the fence is within the public right-of-way, so I do support it. I don't think it's a huge amount of money, and given the role that CPA in helping to fund it, I think it's a proposal that I, again, do support somewhat hesitantly.
All right, well, I think we will go now to the lightning round. Of course, we did, in fact, address some of these things during the discussion that preceded this. But I'm going to ask you just to say yes or no to each one of them, and I have given you each a summary of the articles that in the warrant that these refer to. So
Can I just say one
Go
final
ahead.
point on the last
Go ahead.
topic? I just want to say that when you say 17,000 isn't a lot of money, that concerns me as a concept. I think if the cost of materials and workmanship should be $2,000, to automatically be willing to spend $17,000 says, what about the various other things we spend money on? Are we signing away 20, 50, 100% more than we should be doing on those? I don't know.
Okay. Now, Article 12, would you appropriate or would you support a motion to appropriate $1,300,000 to purchase and install automatic water meter reading equipment to be paid for from the Water Enterprise Fund retained earnings? Steve?
Yes.
Yes.
Article 13, would you appropriate $7,750,000 to be expended by the school committee for the design, engineering, construction of the Wayland High School Stadium Complex renovation using crumb rubber infill, as well as also some construction of the tennis courts, softball field to be financed principally by borrowing $7,075,000, and the Community Preservation Fund $500,000. Do you support that, Tom?
Yes.
And Steve?
Yes.
Article 15. Would you appropriate or support a motion to appropriate $3,753,901 to construct a multi-purpose synthetic turf athletic playing field at the local conservation and recreation area to be financed by borrowing and $150,000 from the Recreation Stabilization Fund? Steve?
No.
Tom?
Yes.
Would you appropriate $1.5 million to construct a grass field, this is Article 16, at the local conservation and recreation field to be financed by borrowing? This is really an alternative proposal.
No.
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 Steve? This is the one, this is the turf field, a grass field alternative. Which was
I'm not
been-
prepared to use this location at this time, so the answer is no.
Would you, this is Article 19, would you, this is what we just discussed, but we'll ask it anyway. Would you appropriate, among other things, $17,000 to be expended by the First Parish Church with the approval of the Wayland Historical Commission to rehabilitate historical fencing of granite posts on church property, which are primarily in the town's right-of-way, to be financed from the Community Preservation Fund? Tom?
Yes.
Steve?
As I said, for the reasons no.
Article 22, to amend, would you amend Wayland's zoning bylaws to create a new medical marijuana district? Discuss that too.
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
And finally, would you vote to amend the town's bylaws to forbid all persons from carrying firearms into town buildings or town-sponsored events without the written authorization of the selectmen? Tom?
No.
You do not support that.
Not hard.
Steve, you?
Maybe a yes. Really, this is not an easy yes or no kind of question.
These are not supposed to be easy.
Well, if I'm voting on it, I'll wait till I actually have the button in hand.
All right. And so we're going to have to leave it at that. I want to thank the candidates for the 3-year term on the Board of Selectmen. I want to thank the candidates for their contributions to our show. And we're going to take a break and then present the second part of Ask the Candidates Live. The 2 candidates who wish to serve as an Associate Planning Board member for 5 years. Please stay tuned, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. Welcome back to the second part of Ask the Candidates Live. My guests for this segment of our show are 2 candidates who wish to serve as an Associate Planning Board member for a 5-year term. They are in alphabetical order: Lawrence Kiernan,
Larry.
well, and Annette Lewis. Before taking your calls, each of the candidates will make a 2-minute opening statement. The order has been determined by prior agreement. Have you agreed?
No,
No, you haven't
Whatever
agreed?
you
Larry,
want.
Larry can go first, it's
So-
fine with me.
Would you like to go first,
Sure.
Larry? All right, Larry, you're on. With
Okay.
your opening statement.
One second. I think that's all right. Hi, my name's Larry Kiernan. I moved here into Wayland with my wife 22 years ago, Linda. I have 3 kids, and 2 are still in the Wayland School District. I've served on the Conservation Commission for several years, a youth coach, soccer and basketball. I've been the Wayland representative to the Mass Central Rail Trail for about 12 years and was a founder of Friends of the Wayland Rail Trail. So through my work with the rail trail, have really had some great exposure to the town. All the departments, selectmen, conservation, recreation, historic district, historical commission, DPW, and but the group I worked probably closest with was the planning board and the department. It worked hand in hand with Sarkeesian to help move the rail trail forward. And what I learned was that, you know, the planning board plays a very important role in the town, and the master plan, of which the rail trail was a component, really makes a difference in terms of what gets done in the town. So I'm running for associate planning board member. I think it's a great place to join the board and to learn the process, and looking to help drive forward open space use, both active and passive, help with the master plan, and of course any projects the board thinks I can help with. So thank you.
Annette?
Thank you. I'm Annette Lewis, a 40-year resident of Wayland and a land use and environmental attorney. I'm running for Associate Planning Board member, having been elected and served in that position twice before. I believe that my extensive background and attention to detail will be an asset to the board. I've attended numerous state-level training sessions for planning boards, and I have a comprehensive knowledge of Wayland zoning bylaws and the planning board's 6 sets of regulations. Over the years, I've put together crucial timelines, laying out milestones and timeframes within which the planning board is required to take action. This is most important to stave off lawsuits and also to avoid what is known as constructive approval, where if the board misses the date for issuing a decision, an applicant's filing is deemed approved without the board ever having issued its decision or imposed any conditions. For 10 years, while I was an elected road commissioner, we worked collaboratively with the planning board on layout of roadways within conservation clusters and subdivisions, location of curb cuts for driveways, and design and control of stormwater drainage. By way of additional planning board related background, I served on the committees that produced the 2004 Wayland Town Master Plan and the 2017 Wayland Real Asset Planning Committee report. The report of the later RAP Committee proposed a long-range planning process for setting priorities, objectively analyzing proposed projects, and being ready and able to fund those major capital expenditures. As Associate Planning Board member, I will provide historical perspective and necessary attention to detail to support the efforts of the current members of the Planning Board. I ask for your vote on Tuesday, April the 23rd. Thank you.
So, would you tell me and everybody else in town what are the duties of an associate member of the planning board? Larry, first.
Well, you know, the role of the members on the board really is to help build the vision for the town, and as it applies to open space and developments and land use within the town. And the real duty, as I look at what they require for a planning board member, is a willingness to get involved with the board, which I am, put in the effort to learn the laws and the regulation, because there's certainly a good deal of them, particularly here in the town of Wayland, and apply common sense, fairness, and objectivity to decisions that are being made, balancing the public good with the private rights and interests of folks. So those are the primary duties, the large overall mission.
Annette?
The associate member can only vote on special permits that come before the board. That position was created by state statute, and then the town adopted a bylaw make it a town requirement. You need 4 out of 5 of the members to approve a special permit, and often if members have missed meetings or there's someone has resigned, you need to have those 4 members present. So that's the sole purpose of the associate member. But traditionally in Wayland and in other communities, the associate picks up the slack, especially with regard to procedural matters in compliance with bylaws.
Now, I think, Larry, you told us how long you've been in Wayland. I guess you both told us how long you've lived in Wayland, isn't that right?
I think
How long have you been?
can check that out. 22 years.
Okay.
40
You
years.
said 40 years. All right. Can you tell us, please, we'll start off with Annette this time, about your academic or professional training and experience in land use planning?
Yes. I've had my law degree since 1973, and during that time I practiced regulatory law at the federal level, and then environmental law at the federal, state, and international level. And in dealing with the environmental law, I've had to deal with land use planning issues, having to comply with different sets of regulations so that my clients could construct large projects. One of the larger projects that I did was the Hydro-Quebec project, which brought in hydropower from Canada into New England, all the New England states. And I did the licensing and permitting for all the New England states. I was the overall coordinator and actually did the Massachusetts permitting, but also prepared the main focus documents that were used in all the other jurisdictions.
On whose behalf did you do that?
At the time, it was New England Electric System. I was working for them, and we did it on behalf of what was then NEPOOL. It's now changed its name, but it was the Regional Power Grid.
Larry?
Yeah, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't play one on TV either. But I do have experience and with, I've been in business, second level manager, managing large projects and people and regulation overall.
What
in
sort
my
of
work.
projects are you involved in? Or what
I
do you
work
do?
in the technology field, handle partnerships, complex partnerships with technology alliances in that space, but not in land particular. But when I look at what what they call for in a planning board member is not legal or professional education, but a willingness to get involved, to apply common sense, to take the time to understand the law and regulations that apply. I did that in the Conservation Commission. Had no experience in that, but after you invest the time, learn about the laws and rules, you can then apply them and make sure they're implemented fairly in town.
Well, now it's time once again for you, the viewers, to ask your questions. The number to call is 508-358-3472. You'll see that number on the screen. And each candidate will have 1 minute to answer your questions so that we can field as many questions as possible. So come on and call on in. All right, while you're thinking of your questions, I will ask another question. What do you think are the key issues in this race between the two of you? We'll start off with Annette.
Because this is the first time I've heard any statement from Larry, it's a little difficult, but I don't think that the planning board is a board that is supposed to apply common sense only. It's a board that is supposed to draft carefully considered zoning bylaws and then enforce those bylaws once they've been approved by town meeting. There are some places where one can apply discretion, but I think it's important that once town meeting has voted on what they expect the zoning bylaws to be, that the board enforce those bylaws.
And Larry, what do you think are the key issues in this race?
Like Annette, I wasn't sure either. I figured it might have to do with experience, given that Annette has a lot more experience in the field. But I must disagree. When I look at the website and how they talk about what is the most important component of a board member on the planning board, it is common sense, fairness, objectivity as it relates to the law that's being done. So, but I think, you know, what I bring a lot of background in forming partnerships, alliances, collaboration, working with the broader, you know, the other offices, committees, boards, and I think I can bring that to the planning department to make sure we're collaborating and communicating with each other appropriately.
Welcome, good evening. Welcome to Ask the Candidates Live. What is your name and address, please?
I'm Susan, and I'm having trouble hearing you.
What is your name and address, please?
Oh,
Susan?
Woodridge Road.
Do you have a second name with Susan?
Susan Hager?
Susan Hager?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. What is your question?
I would love to know if either of these candidates not only volunteer for something as prestigious as a town committee, but also roll up their sleeves and get out, for example, on town cleanup day or some other areas of town volunteerism.
Thank you. All right, candidates are being asked, have you done anything other than run for office or serve on a town committee?
Which of us?
To me,
I think we'll start with you.
Sure.
With you, Larry.
Yeah, let's see. Well, I did mow the rail trail for 10 years to keep it moving before we got it paved. I did work on, and actually worked with the high school on getting volunteers to help clear certain areas on the trail. I also instituted took advantage of the National Walk to School Day and instituted that at Claypit School for about 8 years, walking kids from the library to Claypit Hill School. So I guess from a volunteer roll up your sleeves perspective, that's about it.
Annette?
Yes, every year I participate in the Cleanup Wayland. I did it this past Saturday. And I also just walk down my street from my house to 126 and usually pick up 2 bags of dirt or trash just on a walk. I do that routinely. I was a Girl Scout troop leader for years and a Silver Award advisor. And I was on the Wayland Schools Early Childhood Advisory Council that founded the Children's Way.
What, starting with you, Annette, what do you think is the best thing that the planning board did this year?
I think there are 2 things. They proposed a bylaw last year that was adopted at town meeting and then approved by the Attorney General, dealing with the land on Launcher Way, the former military base, where they were trying to protect the affordable housing, or the size of housing that is affordable in that location. And in addition, they got the bylaw change that allows for exempt uses to be reviewed by the planning board. The exempt uses are daycare, religious institutions. There are 5 of them. Anyway, there are things that normally you would not be allowed to review, but we're allowed to review them under site plan review. And this was their second try at it. Their first try, the planning board missed the procedural deadlines that they needed to meet as a prerequisite, so they had to come back to town meeting again and have us approve it again, and then have the Attorney General approve the bylaw.
Larry, what are the best things they did, the planning board did this past year?
I would agree on Launch Away. I think that's a great opportunity for the town with that bylaw being passed. But I think as I said in my opening remarks, the rail trail, in my opinion, would not have been completed if not for the planning board and department really helping spearhead that for the town, working with Department of Conservation Recreation, working directly with Eversource, working with the Regional Planning Agency, and ensuring the funds got spent properly, and that we worked out ultimately the timing with the state to get it paved. So to me, those are, that was probably the crowning achievement, although not, part of the master plan, but not part of the, any bylaw passed.
As I said a few minutes ago, this is your opportunity to call in to ask the candidates questions that you may have. And I certainly hope that you'll take advantage of this, because this only happens once a year. So please call in, and I know that we'll enjoy hearing your questions and trying to answer those questions. Meanwhile, I will come up with another question that I had prepared before, in the event that I didn't get very many phone calls. What do you think, what else do you think Wayland should do to encourage the creation of affordable housing? We'll start this time with you, Larry.
It seems every time there's a affordable housing initiative, there's a surprising lack of support that comes from the town. I think there's more education needs to happen to show folks the value of affordable housing, how it really helps the overall community in Wayland. I think the first thing is let's ensure we get River's Edge moved forward. And maybe even expanded to help meet the 40B requirements that we have. And there may be some, bylaw changes we could make in town that would afford us the opportunity to be more creative on how we address affordable housing.
Annette.
I think that we have made changes in our bylaws, particularly since the 2004 master plan. We have an affordable housing trust fund. We have an affordable housing bylaw that was adopted after the master plan, and it was recommended that it be adopted. I think that we have a number of provisions in our bylaws. We have accessory dwelling units that one can have. I think we need to educate people how to take advantage of the bylaws that exist. And in addition, I think that it's important that once we get people here in affordable housing, that we control our taxes and our tax rate so that those people can count on a steady tax so that they can afford to stay here. What's happened in many cases is people have come here thinking that they could afford to stay, and then our taxes have gone up, even on their affordable units, and then they've had to leave, and that's not fair.
What specific proposals do you plan to submit to your colleagues on the planning board upon your election? Annette?
Technically, the role of the associate is not to propose things to the planning board. It's to be assisting the planning board, and it's the full members who generally do that. But I would propose reinstituting a long-standing practice of monthly written reports outlining progress and outstanding deliverables for pending and approved projects with the status of the milestones to be met. We've had occasions over the last few years where projects have gone off track, haven't complied with the bylaws and what was required in the decisions, and that is not beneficial to the rest of the community.
Larry, what's the first thing that you would propose to the planning board?
I didn't have a plan for a proposal. I don't have one written up, but the area of interest, for me is around Town Center and Route 20. The way it looks, the sidewalks, being able to integrate it into the town center development and the rail trail to try and make it more pedestrian friendly in that area and attractive would be something I'd like to look at, but no specific proposal in hand right now.
I have one other question which neither one of you may be able to answer, but that's a good way, I think, to finish the program. What is being done to find an appropriate place to park our school buses?
Well, I
Larry?
know a little bit about it.
Share it with us.
So I know Sarkeesian town planner met with the town of Sudbury, and we are looking to put the buses for a 2-year period in the Mass DOT location, which is across from Town Line Hardware. If you go to Town Line Hardware on the other side of the road, there's a large lot behind a Land Rover dealer, I guess. We're looking to lease that for 2 years, and there's maybe an option for us to work with one of the local businesses to work out a lease over a long period of time for a longer term solution, at least in that space, if that turns out to be the best place to keep the buses.
Annette? School buses.
Yep. When I was on the Wayland Rail Asset Planning Committee, we looked at, because the issue was immediate and the school department needed a place to put buses immediately, we looked at school parcels and other parcels in town, but mostly school parcels, and provided a detailed memo with maps to them showing how there was considerable amount of space on school-owned property, not necessarily where there are school buildings, but there are other parcels. So we did that. And then when it became clear that some in the public were not happy about looking at all on school property, I went and researched everyone's file in town and Mass DEP and did an analysis of the old landfill on Route 20. And put together a detailed memo, shared it with everyone, and it's my understanding that the Department of Public Works is looking into whether or not they can use that, some of that space, because it's a considerably large parcel, for parking of school buses and perhaps their laydown area.
All right. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it at that. I want to thank Larry and Annette for their contributions to the show. Now, isn't Wayland a wonderful town resource for us and our children? The answer is yes. Be sure to vote on Thursday, April 23rd. Election results will be shown on Comcast Channel 9 and Verizon Channel 38 as they become available. This show will also be available for watching on demand on the Waycam channel's website, waycam.tv, and it will be rebroadcast before the election. So before we close, I would like to thank Waycam for the use of the studio, Jim Mullane, Mark Foreman, and Stephen Shosted, production assistant, for making this program possible. Some of the volunteers I've mentioned will make it possible for those of us who absolutely cannot attend the annual town meeting to do so. I would especially like to thank all the candidates for coming and to thank you for participating in our program. Next year, I hope we'll have more people calling in and participating. But, you know, we start with a few and we will build up. And thank you for watching, and we'll miss you, not miss you, but we'll see you at town meeting, which will be held in the high school field house on Monday, April 29th at 7 p.m. Good night.